Isn't the digital world just a pleasure, guys? Okay, it looks like we are now finally streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. The great thing is I got everything fixed and then my camera decided to stop working. So thank you so much for your patience. We are back. We're going to have a great time cutting a little Pixie here. We'll be able to still get most of the content done. We've got a little buffer time between my segment and Anna's next segment, so I can run a little bit late. And someone during this segment is going to win one of these, a super, super badass pivot point tripod, and the Redken Extreme, Redken Bleach Extreme package. So super stoked to give that away because we eat, breathe, and sleep and love pivot point. So super excited about that. Plus, you're going to have a little special message from Robert Passage himself at the end of this broadcast. So that'll be fun. Okay. Many of you didn't hear the intro that I gave earlier. So this is today's Pixie. This isn't 100% complete, actually. This is a mannequin head that I am 98% complete with. But I wanted to kind of show you the difference between where we have been more with Pixie haircuts, which has been more of that undercut sort of texture, lots of short hair underneath, very short around the perimeters. Now what we're starting to see is because of the shag and that 70s and actually 90s as well influence is coming back, we're starting to see that element come into the Pixies. So you can see this hasn't been super cleaned up on the perimeter. This has been left super loose, really shattered, and I understand that that looks a little heavy right now, but we're going to talk about how to address that in the finishing and the detailing. But we're going to go through the haircut and show you how to start to build something that can have a little bit more looseness and separation and texture through the perimeter. So let's get started, shall we? So I've already started to pre-cut the head a little bit for you because just based on the amount of time that we have, I just don't want to spend so much time. But you can see we started to section. Our first section was the vertical transition. And Jesse Linares, when he comes up a little bit later for his Bob class, he's going to show you in depth how to do this foundational breakdown. Foundational breakdown is really about dividing the hair off into true side, back, and top so that we can really understand the distribution of the hair as it pertains to the surface of the head. So we've done that first. Go ahead and put a clip in it. It's kind of like put a ring on it, but put a clip in it. Dad jokes, I got tons of them. So we have our top, back, and sides. You can see that we've already cut this side and part of the back. So the first step that we're going to do is we're going to cut perimeter first. Now, like I said, we actually want to leave a softer, more shaggy perimeter. So a lot of times what we might do is we might start at the bottom, start with our finger angle in there and start to build in, but we don't have much texture and movement on the perimeter. We cut all that away. So we're going through a process first to build some texture and looseness into that perimeter. So we'll section off just maybe like 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch. This is really going to depend on density and texture of hair too. If she's got really fine hair, you may actually want to section a slightly larger section there because with finer hair, we want to make sure that we have some density through that perimeter. So with finer hair, take this section around the perimeter just slightly larger. We're going to work wet. She's dried because she's been sectioned for a little bit. A little continuous mist there. We did prep the mannequin head with Redken's One United. We pretty much drink this stuff around here, mainly because it just works so well on the mannequin heads. We did start shampooing and conditioning the mannequin heads with that new Redken product that you guys are potentially going to win at the end of this. The reason for it is I think the biotin, especially that's in the shampoo and conditioner, really helps to smooth out the mannequin heads. Plus, add just a touch of the new Play Safe, which we're digging this for the mannequin heads as well. It creates some heat protection, but it also really makes the hair have some nice smoothness. I think we have a question, Michelle?
If you just want to go over the contest again.
So the contest, you just follow the instructions on the screen, guys. Text the word contest to the phone number that's on the screen right now. You have a chance to win the Pivot Point tripod and the Redken Extreme package. And we'll pick that winner by the end of this segment, and then we'll announce it right here. So we're going to take that section that's along the side here. Watch carefully. I'm going to take the comb from underneath, and I'm going to take the bridge of that comb, elevate it right up to the top of the section. So Sammy always talks about this, how we can use the bridge of the comb or the spine of the comb to place hair where we want it to be. So we take that bridge of the comb, spine of the comb, we're going to put our fingers underneath so we can hold, and we're going to lift the hair, keep the fingers tight against the head. The hair is now at the top of this section. So when I work with the shear and point cut, pretty softly, just scan through that. What happens is because that perimeter edge has been elevated, when we drop it down, it leaves us something softer and longer. Put a little water on that so it doesn't spring up on us. I know you guys have been super curious about the tools we've been using, so I'll be more conscious to share those with you. This is the Streamline 6.25, 6¼ inch shear. We designed this shear to maintain all the positive ergonomics that we have in our shears with that forward set thumb, but much smaller finger holes to it, which kind of gives it that glove fit to it. So I like the 6¼ for this particular kind of work. It's been pretty much my daily driver lately, just because it's such a lightweight and very comfortable shear. So here, same thing. Look at my finger angle. It's staying parallel to the line of that section because I want to over direct the hair and elevate away from the hairline. So same thing, the comb does the work. Follow the bridge of the comb all the way to the top of the section. That is drawing the hair away from the section. My friend DJ Muldoon, who's one of my big mentors and as far as being a teacher, he always says, take the hair away from what you want to keep. So by elevating and over directing away from that perimeter, we're going to keep length towards that side. It's not exactly how he says it. He says it much more eloquently. Question?
We're getting several questions regarding type of hair texture, thickness, thinness. Would this haircut work?
Cool. All right, so this one we're going to mainly be looking at someone that has more kind of medium to finer textures of hair. Super thick, coarse, curly hair would probably end up feeling a little bit mushroomy with these exact techniques that I'm going to show you. I'll try to remember to talk to you as we move through the haircut on some of the things that you could adjust within the haircut to adapt better to that thicker hair texture.
And what about curly?
So curly is really going to depend on what they do with their curly hair, because if they leave it curly, this isn't the haircut for them. Because this, especially at this short, if they have tight curl, is going to become weird little ringlets around the side of her head. Probably not the look they're looking for. If they're going to blow dry it and they have good control over their curl, that's okay. Then we can work with that. So we're going to start in the front here. And actually, let me bring you over to the chart here for a second. So as you can see, phase one there, we're using the perimeter It just gets elevated away from the perimeter. Now we're going to go into vertical sections and look at the cutting line with the vertical sections. The cutting line is going to be a diagonal. So my section itself is vertical. Let me get just a little more water on her for control. You know, with haircuts like this, because they do have multiple sections and a shorter hair, these are the kind of haircuts we do like to work with at least damp. Oops, drop a comb. Add that to the list of combs we have to give away, Sam. But when we work damp, we have a little bit more control over keeping our sections clean. So that's one of the reasons you might choose to work with wet hair over dry hair. Grab our shear again. We have that vertical section. The elevation is going to be what we call 90 degrees horizontal. What we mean by that is just that the individual hairs are going to be held parallel with the floor or horizontally. Vertical section, my fingers go flat to her head because the shortest point at the top edge of what we cut for the perimeter is pretty much against the head for finger length. So that's where I want to go as well. Place my fingers against the head, draw the fingers out until I create that diagonal finger angle I'm looking for, and then we're just going to scan down the section on that diagonal cutting line. So what we're creating right here is something that goes like this. It's actually shortest kind of in the middle of the section. So that's what gives us that concave just above the ear, but still allows us to keep some length and texture in the perimeter. Next question.
It's curly, but the guest keeps it straight. Would you still cut wet or dry?
So the question is, if it's curly, but they do straighten it, would we still cut this wet or dry? Probably still wet, actually, because I think on wet, you're still going to have the benefit of more control. Now, you can absolutely do this dry. So I guess my answer might be, it's going to be based a little bit in personal preference. If you feel like you have more control over that guest's hair on dry hair, then maybe the compromise is that you don't have quite as much control with the sections, but maybe you have better control over the texture. Every decision, this is something we really, really believe, guys, and this is why we don't speak in terms of always, never, right, wrong. You're always going to get a little bit of an ambiguous answer from us because we don't believe that there's always a right way or wrong way to do something. In fact, we tell people if you sit in a classroom and they're just basically preaching, well, this is the way you have to do this, and this is the way you have to do that, we probably suggest you find a different classroom. Because yes, the compromise you might make by blow drying at first is maybe it's a little tougher to control your sections, but maybe the benefit is you have more control over the texture of the hair. Or vice versa. If you cut it wet, you might struggle with their texture a little bit more, but maybe you feel more in control of your sections, elevations, and over directions. So it's always a benefit and compromise kind of process. As we work back the head, we're continuing with vertical sections, the exact same thing. So we're not over directing this forward or back because we're not trying to, at this point, gain any length in either direction. So this has already been done on the opposite side of the head, diagonal finger angle. I can see my guide from behind. And then just scan down my section, staying fairly parallel. I don't want this to become very chunky looking. I want it to stay pretty soft.
We're getting a couple questions asking whether the difference between blunt cutting this, point cutting, or using a razor.
Great. So let's address why we're point cutting this. We also believe that efficiency is a super important part of what we do as hairdressers. As you guys can probably tell, if you've watched any of my education, I'm not fast at anything. In fact, I am quite slow at most things. So that means that when I'm cutting hair, I have to choose the most efficient way to get to my end result, because that's the only way I'm going to get things done in the amount of time that I have. So we believe if you don't want a blunt hard line, then why are you cutting a blunt hard line? Because if you're cutting a blunt hard line with the first cut, then you have to destroy that blunt hard line somewhere throughout the process that you're working. So we definitely see a trend towards more texture within haircuts. That would tell me I should probably cut with an instrument and with a process that's going to give me texture. The point cut here is very, very soft because the hair is short. If I go in at a more strong diagonal and make these kind of choppy feeling cuts, that is going to be very apparent with how short this hair is. So because it's so short, we're going to stay a little bit more parallel with that point cut. Now, could I use a razor for this? Absolutely yes. And I plan to show you a couple sections with the razor. You will get a slightly different texture with the razor, but same kind of principle. If I don't want straight hard lines, then don't choose a process and a technique that creates straight hard lines. So we're going to grab the razor. So this one is our straight razor. A couple of you asked, let me get this up here for you. A couple of you asked about the blades. We have 3 blades that come with our razors. This one is the straight, what we call the straight blade. It does have a guard to it. But we do have 2 texturizing blades that come within the pack. We have a 9-gap and a 6-gap razor. So those gaps, they only cut pieces of hair. So you can think about the white one, which is the 9-gap, or wait, am I saying that right? I might be saying that wrong. But anyway, the white one that has the smaller gaps in it, we look at that as more like a thinning or blending shear. And then we have another one that has very big gaps to it, a 6-gap razor, and that's color-coded black. That one has almost like a chunking shear sort of texture to it. So as we cross around the back of the head, we're going to continue in those vertical sections. With the razor, one thing changes, and that's where I stop my fingers, because when I'm cutting with a shear, the guide is out here in the front of my fingers. When we're cutting with a razor, the guide is behind the fingers. So I have to slide past my guide so that I have space to bring the razor in, get some tension, and then make the circular cuts. Everything else is the same. The elevation is the same. The finger angle is the same. So nothing else changes here. When you're cutting with a razor, a couple things that are going to really help you. Make sure you get good, strong tension on the hair. It allows the razor blade to float through the hair much more easily. And we recommend that you change your razor blade every single cut. And in fact, if it's someone with very thick, heavy, resilient hair, and I heard Jesse the other day say that he will actually change his razor blade maybe once or twice throughout that particular haircut, which I haven't done before, but I think that's a smart idea, because there are times by the end of the haircut, I feel like I'm starting to struggle a little bit with the hair. If you have good tension, wet hair that's prepped with some kind of silky soft product, if you have the right angle of the blade in relationship to the hair, which is somewhere in about a 45-degree angle, and you're making good strokes, that razor should be floating through the hair as if it was just a hot knife through butter. If you feel like you're struggling for some reason with your razor through the hair, something's wrong. You either have a dull razor, you don't have enough tension, you don't have the right angle. Typically, it's one of those particular challenges. How we doing out there? Give me a hey in the comment box if you're feeling good, if you're having a good time, if you're enjoying the program.
How would you cross-check this?
Good question. Cross-checking. So cross-checking, because I'm using a vertical section, I'm now going to take a horizontal section. Here's the thing, when we're working with such dramatic texture like this, it's not going to show me a clean line. So, Sammy's always like, it's hard to cross-check things that you've cut with such bold texture, right? And so what we're looking for when we cross-check with that horizontal is just to make sure that the overall shape is staying with the head shape. Because remember, we're not over-directing forward, we're not over-directing back, because we're not trying to build length in a certain direction here. We're just trying to keep it parallel with the head shape. So I just take a couple sections horizontally through this bottom, just to make sure I'm staying balanced. So we got just one or two more sections here. Thanks for staying with me, guys, and I apologize again for those issues in the beginning of the broadcast. If you are interested in any tools, I want to be really sensitive about talking about our sale, because we totally understand that there's so many of you that are facing some financial hardship right now, and we want to be supportive of that. What's really important to us right now is if you are looking to maybe stock up on some things or purchase some tools for when you're ready to get back in the salon, we wanted to offer you an opportunity to purchase some tools at the best price possible and also do something philanthropic with that money. So what we've done is we've put the tools at the cheapest price that we possibly can, which is 40% off almost everything on the website. But to make sure that we were giving back to the community, we also are donating 10% of all those sales to the Pro Beauty Association's COVID-19 Disaster Fund, which is incredible. We had Steve Sleeper on just right at the end of Sam's segment. And what's cool is they've had over $1 million now that have gone through their hands to help out hairdressers. And if you're one of those people that are struggling financially, go to pba.org, because you can apply for assistance with that COVID-19 disaster relief fund. If you are someone that your family is doing pretty good right now, maybe you have a spouse or someone else in your household that's still working and you're pretty comfortable, donating to that COVID-19 relief fund, even if it's $5, even if it's $2, honestly, that's what's going to help them to continue to help hairdressers in need. So if you got something, share it. And if you don't, we're here for you.
Would you recommend doing this cut on a guest with a difficult hairline?
So one thing that would actually be nice about doing this on a guest with a difficult hairline is that with this little bit of extra length that you're starting to see build, this is something that they can actually blow dry. There's kind of two perspectives when we start talking about dealing with difficult hairlines, because in one respect, if we cut it shorter like this, it could be more difficult, if we leave it longer like this, it could become a little bit more difficult for them to control, just because those growth patterns are going to show up more. But if there's someone that does like to blow dry, the benefit of doing this is it gives them something to actually grip onto with the blow dryer. Now, the other option would be if they have a very difficult hairline, maybe you want to actually blast it off short enough that it doesn't matter what the growth pattern does. Like for me, for example, I have a really crazy growth pattern in the back of my hair. I actually don't like my hair to go super clipper short sometimes. So what I do is I have my barber, I have him keep the sides a little bit more soft and, textured. But then when we get to the neckline, he does what's called a Brooklyn blowout. And the Brooklyn blowout is a super low fade that pretty much takes it down to the skin. So just two options. And that's really, again, it comes down to the discussion with your client. All right, so now we are going to go into the next part of the haircut, which is going to be step number 2 here. Let me get that down for you a little bit. So step number 2, you can see, is the crown area. So we're going to divide off from the high point, kind of down towards the ear, but we're not necessarily targeting the ear at this point. It's more just that's where it's going to end up. And I'll explain a little bit more on the mannequin head. The elevation is kind of a diagonal elevation because we want it to be just straight lines out from that crown. So it's pretty much 90 degrees perfectly from the middle of the crown, but you can see it's a little bit different elevation at different points. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go through. Back you up a little bit here. There we go. Sorry, I'm playing with my zoom lens today to see if that gives you guys better views without me jumping around with the tripod. Of course, I need to give myself one more thing to pay attention to during a live broadcast, right? Zoom lens, haircut, comments, questions. And thank you for your comments and questions. Thank you for also being patient with us with the comments and questions. We have never had this big of an attendance before on our broadcasts. So sometimes we have a little bit of a delay in getting to some of your comments. And honestly, some of them we're just not going to get to right away. We'll try our best to come back in and answer some of those as we go. And guys, we appreciate you being a community. Some of you out there have been answering each other's questions, and that's beautiful. Thank you for doing that. All right, so let's look at this sectioning. If we take the comb and we put it parallel with the floor, set it on top of her head, see where it's hitting the head. That's the highest point of the head. That tells us where the head starts to round backwards and become more the crown. From there, we want to just encompass the crown. So I'm not necessarily specifically targeting anything on the ear. We're looking at what is the natural shape of this crown area and just following that crown. We're going to work with pie-shaped sections, which is a bit of a tongue twister. We'll start in the center, and it'll work down to about 1 inch wide at the occipital. We'll go here. I'm going to kind of drop down a little bit so you can see. Probably should not have chosen a dark shirt for the background, but hey, whatever. Here's what's going to be interesting. Because the head is curved, if I choose a straight cutting line, look at the comb, the straight cutting line, you'll notice that the hair is shortest at the most protruding portion of the round, which is the middle of the crown right there. And it's going to be longer here and longer here. That is part of that shape that I'm trying to create. So my finger angle takes on that same thing. I am going to just kind of clip off a little of that excess length just because it'll be easier to point cut. Now up here, we are going to approach it with a little deeper notch type of technique. Yes.
How soon would you need to recut to maintain this look?
That's really going to depend on client. So the question is, how long would I schedule this person to come back in? Between 4 to 6 weeks, because a couple of things. We all know that different people's hair grows at different paces, but also it's really going to depend on the tolerance of our guest. Because, yeah, we have certain guests that they actually don't mind the evolution that happens as their hair grows out. And if it's a great haircut, hopefully it will grow out with some kind of little bit of beauty to it, some elegance in the grow out. But I also have had clients in my clientele that, they want in every 3 weeks with a haircut like this because they can't tolerate anything that isn't just really freshly cut. So again, as we pie shape around, we're not over directing. We're just looking for, there's my guide. We're going to keep the finger angle very parallel to the crown. The elevation is diagonal. You could call it 90 degrees from the center of the crown if you want to talk about degrees of elevation, because the degree of elevation is definitely 90 degrees here from the center of the crown, but it's also staying that same elevation as we get to the crown. We're not going 90 degrees, or sorry, to the high point. We're not lifting the elevation in relationship to the high point. Everything is staying at that same elevation. We'll continue with that pie-shaped sectioning, working around the head shape. That diagonal elevation, or 90 degrees from the center of the crown. Get rid of some length there, just so it's a little easier to get our notching in there. And you can see why it's important to work with a blade that has just a little bit of length to it. I don't have to necessarily pick up the big 7-inch dry cutting shear here because I'm not going super, super deep into the hair strand. But, if we were working with the 5.5, probably need a little bit more blade length to get that texture.
We're getting a lot of questions regarding addressing cowlicks.
Okay, especially because I'm in the crown, right? So this is an area that we have tons of different growth patterns and cowlicks. Within the crown, one of the things that you can do to make sure that you give your guest the best chance of addressing the issues in the crown is to keep some texture and movement in there. If we get super blunt in these areas that have really strong growth patterns, when they don't control them properly, it's much more apparent. So cowlicks are a couple of things. It's one, part cutting. Two, it's also about helping them to understand how to work with their cowlicks with the blow dry. So with a blow dry in the crown here, because we don't want the crown to lay perfectly flat, we want it to have some texture and movement to it, we're going to make sure we teach them how to properly wrap dry the hair back and forth to help break down those cowlicks.
And what would you do if you happen to lose your cutting guide?
If I go to my next section and I take that section and I'm like, where's my guide? Where's my guide? Well, the best thing to do is actually just to step back a little bit, because if you know that you have a guide back here somewhere, then you just take a section backwards, because typically what we find is when people say, hey, I've lost my guide, typically what they're telling us is they're ahead of it. So they took too much hair in front and not enough hair behind the section to keep a consistent guide. So if I lose my guide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to go, okay, let me step backward a little bit. Let's take that section. Oh, okay, there's a guide. Get you stronger. You can also take a quick cross-check. So you can cross-check the hair. Take your cross-section and elevate it out. And what you'll notice is, oh, look, okay, well, there's where it was. And here's the new hair that needs to be cut now. So that tells you, okay, I have to step all the way back to there to find that guide again. As we start to work around the left side of the head, nothing changes. Everything stays the same. I'm only going to cut 1 or 2 sections because I know I'm probably starting to run out of time here. But as we work, a lot of times we're taught that we have to change body position side to side. Once again, there is a benefit and there is a compromise to every decision we make. The benefit of changing body position is consistency in over direction. So if I'm over directing back, if I switch my body, then I can continue to over direct to the back naturally. But what we find is when people start going from this position to this position with their arm, usually they change their elevation and typically the cutting line as well. So there's benefits and compromises to everything. I'm just going to show you a few sections here on the side so you understand what happens now on the top. If we look over on the diagram here, as you can see on step number 3, now we're going to switch to vertical sections across the top of the head. We are going to over direct the hairline back a bit, but the elevation pretty much stays the same. And here, I'll leave that up just for a second, guys. If you want to get a screenshot of diagrams because we won't probably have time to get back to it. But if you want to get a good screenshot of that diagram, go ahead and take that right now.
And then how would you address thin or scanty hair on the top?
Ooh, I like that term, scanty hair. It sounds very pirate-esque. Pirate-esque. Oi, she's got wee scanty hair. That wasn't very pirate.
That was very Robert Cromeans.
Yeah, I just had it like Robert Cromeans, didn't I? Oh, she's got wee scanty hair. Sorry, Robert. Wait, I completely forgot. What was the question?
What would you do on top if it's thin or scanty?
Okay, good. If it's thin or scanty, which I'm going to think that scanty might mean like thin or fine or just not much density to it. This will actually work quite well because this cutting line on the top is actually going to leave you some extra length at the top of the head. So this will actually work great if it's kind of thinner or finer on the top. So we'll go to a center parting as we go into the top. We're going to take vertical sections. And within that vertical section, we'll take a small piece of the previously cut section from the crown. That establishes my guide. So you can see right there's the guide. The elevation, I'm going to turn her and show that to you from the front so that you get a better perception of what that elevation looks like. So elevation looks like that. So you can see again that because that elevation is kind of at a diagonal like this, the shortest point will actually be at the curvature of the head, and it'll leave me some length at the top. So back to the question that you had earlier, this is going to be beneficial because it's going to leave that little bit of length at the top to create a little bit more density. We'll run just a tiny bit late on this segment, but that's okay because we did build in some buffer time in between the segments. So we'll make sure that we get you back to Anna perfectly on time. We do have to have a little bit of buffer time for transitioning the graphics and all that kind of stuff, but no worries. We'll make sure we don't mess up her time with you, because that's quite important. You guys have really been enjoying Anna's work. I definitely want to send a huge shout out to Jesse and Anna, because I think a lot of you are somewhat familiar with me. You're definitely familiar with Sam, but Jesse and Anna haven't had as much time in the studio as we have. And so I'm just super stoked to see how much that you guys have enjoyed Jesse and Anna this weekend. They're such fantastic hairdressers. And just so you know, you can actually hire them to do online classes for you in your salon. For now, maybe even just at your home. You can basically do these hour-long, 2-hour-long, 3-hour-long online classes where we video chat in with you and your team. So you can do that with Anna, you can do that with Jesse, and you can do that with me. It's called the Artist Studio Live. You can get information on that on the Samvia website if you click on the Education tab. Once you get into the Education tab, just click on, I think it's Artist Booking. Yes, it's Artist Booking. So go to samvia.com, click on the Education tab, and then there's a tab called Artist Booking, and that will give you the information you need. So if we look at it from a profile view here, you can see that I'm now over directing that front hairline back, because if you look at our benchmark, we left length in the front. So to protect that length in the front for the fringe, we will over direct back. This is optional. If you wanted more of a short, highly textured, little choppy baby fringe or something like that, then you could most definitely just continue with no over direction. especially when we're addressing lots of thick hair, instead of point cutting, sometimes it's kind of nice to do this, which is slicing. The movement is very important. You close as you work through the hair. So we're coming from the inside out. So that's going to take more hair from the inside and then leave just a little bit of more wispy length towards the outside. And we'll talk more in detail about that specific topic in the afternoon class today, called texturizing and detailing. All right. From here, we would give her a nice wrap dry. I would love to talk more about wrap drying, but I only have 45 minutes with you.
You're at 40 right now.
So by the magic of TV, look what just happened. Oh, she's blow dried. So basically at this point, with this mannequin head, this is exactly what I just showed you with very little, actually pretty much no detailing. I think I trimmed a few wispy hairs off the bottom, but that's about it. Because I wanted to go through more of the texturizing and detailing with you on this, just live. And I knew that we wouldn't have time to blow dry. So let's talk a little bit about how to soften this up now. Because the main thing that you're going to find, because of the way that the shape is cut, is that you're going to have a pretty strong weight line here. So if you think about it, when we cut that top, because of the finger angle being diagonal, of course, this down here was elevated up higher. So it's going to leave that length and actually just even slightly detached over the bottom. To address that, we're going to grab the Artist Series slide cutting shear. We love this shear. I love the way that Jesse explains it, because he says it's the shear that you never know you wanted until you use it. Or no, the shear that you never knew you needed until you start using it. Because honestly, it's not something you have to have, but after you start playing with it, it's so much fun. So to help to soften out that line, we want the weight, but we don't want the line. We don't want that kind of blockiness. So we're going to place it in just at a diagonal, and then we'll just work down and across the hair strand at a slight diagonal. And as you can see, I'm actually going, I'm closing fully, but notice how it's not grabbing the hair. That's the principle of this shear, is it allows the hair to slightly push as you cut, so you can keep the texture very, very soft. And you can see that now starts to break up that heaviness of the line, but it still leaves that weight, because from a front view, what we want to actually keep is we want to keep that fullness in there. We actually like this shape. It's just that we didn't like the visual line, the heaviness. And we just continue doing that. Anywhere that we see that heaviness, that little bit of bowliness, if you will, even though bowl cuts are kind of cool right now. And then same type of technique through the top. We can just take some sections through the top to continue to break this up, give it some more texture and pieciness. For some reason in my classes, every time I say pieciness, people think I'm saying politically correctness. Like, how would texture be politically correct? Not PC, PC. Get it? And then around the perimeter, to soften up the perimeter, we're going to go to the invisible end shear. So the invisible end is our softest blending shear. It actually allows the hair to kind of slip forward, very similar to the slide cutting shear. So as you cut, it's not going to grab a ton of hair. And it's just going to help me to soften and lighten the density of the hair without taking too much hair away. Because really I like the overall shape. It just has that little bit of bulkiness to the edge.
What makes the slide cutting shear better for this versus your regular shears?
Okay, so the question is, what makes the slide cutting shear better for that type of technique over the regular shear? And it's all about how it allows the hair to slip. Let me show you an example. I'll just flip it to the other side because I don't mind botching it up a little bit. So on this side, let's do the same thing. So let's take the 7-inch dry cutting shear, which is our most aggressive cutting shear. If I do the same thing with the 7-inch dry cutting shear, if I put this on a diagonal, oh, this is going to be fun, and I do that, I think you can probably see what I just did there. I created a huge chunk. So the major difference here is with the slide cutting shear, with that same aggression, you can see it's much softer. It actually pushes the hair out of the way slightly as you cut. So really what you're doing is you're just allowing the hair to be much, much softer as you cut that texture. So from here, really all it is detailing, especially around the perimeter, all those types of things. And then here with the fringe, we're liking this long sweepy fringe. So really, really quick, simple process, just working across again with the slide cutting shear, just to create some diagonal. And if you want it to sweep both ways, guess what? Just do the same thing from the opposite side. Just work through and just softly work some diagonals across that side. Then she actually has the option of pushing it this way, pushing it that way. It just doesn't matter. You can move it any direction she wants. So I think we have a winner for tripod stand and the Redken, sorry, I keep forgetting the name of it, the Bleach Extreme package. And the winner is Renee, I'm going to guess Asciutto? Asciutto? I'm saying it totally wrong, but from North Carolina. So congratulations, Renee. Guys, again, thank you so much for your patience today as we worked through some of the glitches. Definitely going to talk more about the texturizing and detailing process in the afternoon class, so don't miss that. I've got to close down so we can take a quick break and get reset for Anna Peters. She's going to be talking about boho bridal. And we've got lots more to come this afternoon with Jesse and Sam as well. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in just a bit.